Fallout 4's second major DLC takes the player to the place with all the zip of Nuka-Cola. The old amusement park has been overrun by a trio of raider gangs, each with their own distinct personalities and style. The archetype that each group falls into might feel very familiar. This could be because these groups represent the thing that's hiding in your very own skull. When we come across Nuka-World in the year 2287, it's seen better days. It's been split between the pack, operators, and disciples. The pack, as its name might suggest, bases its hierarchy on the perceived leadership structure among pack animals. At the top of the chain is the alpha, being the strongest of the group. It's far from a permanent position, as at any time, he can be challenged for his spot by another member of the gang, with the victor leading the collective into the future, until they themselves are inevitably challenged. The current Alpha Mason has no real desire to shake things up, and if anything, has actually leaned the group further into the animal aesthetic. They do also literally keep animals and fight side by side with their trained attack dogs. The operators are significantly more pragmatic than the pack. Their main drive is the pure and simple acquisition of caps. Being led by the brother and sister duo of Mags and William Black, their ambitions are far past the gates of Nuka-World, and desire to use the slave trade in the park center to its full economic benefit. The final group that calls the park its home are the disciples, and they are unique. Hiding behind their masks, they live on the simple motto of kill or be killed. Being big fans of quote-unquote blood sport, they design and maintain the gauntlet that all potential residents must make their way through. They're simply bloodthirsty, living off the thrill of the kill, and pure sadism. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a hard right turn and travel back from 2287 all the way to 1923, where a man in Vienna, Austria was doing some thinking. About thinking. The person in question is Sigmund Freud. He's the founder of psychoanalysis, and a pretty prominent early author in psychology as a whole. Most of his work is not taught anymore past its historic significance, and you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a lot of psychiatrists nowadays who subscribe to his core tenets. Some of his core tenets being that the main motivating factors for a male are his desire to sleep with his mom and his ever-perpetual fear of getting his genitals cut off. Sigmund, that might have just been a you thing, but I do think his model of the mind is interesting, particularly with how it's able to shine a light on the dynamics of that Fallout DLC we were just talking about. Freud breaks the mind down into three component parts, which he refers to as Das Ich, Ich, and Über-Ich, or more commonly known by their Latin translations as the id, ego, and superego. Now, the intellectuals among you may have just realized that I mentioned three parts of the mind, and there are three raider groups in Nuka-World. So, as to not bury the lead, I believe that the three ruling forces of the park can be mapped onto Freud's theory of the mind quite well. Now, starting with the id, it is the base instincts that a person is born with. It drives you towards pure survival and pleasure with no real hang-ups on morals, ethics, or long-term side effects. It's the desire to eat the dessert that's set aside to be served at the end of the party right now. The urge to tell off or even strike a person who might be particularly getting on your nerves, regardless of the consequences. The sexual feelings that might influence you. That is all your id. It is the embodiment of your most animalistic instincts. And when it comes to animalistic instincts, there's no group that represents that more than the pack. They settle their disagreements with violence, having no concept of the wider ramifications, and are even a major player in the park's slave trade. They hold no real respect for others and seek only to increase their own standing. Their vibrant outfits and guns speaks to their lack of big picture planning, as they just splatter everything with the brightest paints they can find, with no real semblance of order. And frankly, if it wasn't for the other two gangs, they probably would have burnt the entire park down already. Even according to Freud, you need your ego to balance out your id. The ego is your reason and common sense. Freud describes it as a boundary layer between your id and the real world. It includes cultural and societal norms to make sure a person doesn't step too far out of line in service of their id. Your ego is what allows you to pay for a meal at Chipotle as opposed to jumping over the glass divider and gorging yourself with rice and barbacoa. Common imagery is that of a horse and a rider, with the horse being the id and the jockey being the ego. If you want to win a horse race, it'd be kind of difficult on foot. But you need someone to direct the stallion to keep it in bounds and on track. Your ego is what results in long-term success and a functioning person. Nobody exemplifies this quite as well as the operators. The operators are easily the most rational of the gangs, and they do truly care about the long-term stability of their cat-making operations. Chaos is not very good for business, after all. They desire to expand their operations, even into the Commonwealth now that you're in charge, and are perpetually looking forward. They utilize the pack and their slave trade to maximize their earnings, and have managed to keep everything stable so far. They operate almost more like an organized crime family than a raider gang, and have a clear leadership structure that provides stability. The three non-standard armors even feature metallic neckties, almost representing some amount of sophistication and bringing up mafia imagery. Their operations can be summed up by a quote from a former mob boss for the Philadelphia Mafia: "Make money, not headlines." And with two of the raider gangs covered and one concept left, that leaves us with the disciples, representing the superego. The superego is almost your high-level thinking. It's concerned with morals and ethics, and you can think of it as your conscience. It's built from the world around you, as it aims to drive you to perfection, or at least what you think perfection is. That part is key, as the disciples don't really seem to represent the ideals of the Western society we may be familiar with. They are utterly sadistic, but that's just their moral and ethical code. They're not indiscriminately violent like the pack. They're meticulous and ordered. Bloodsport is not very sporting if it's unregulated. They built the gauntlet with a clear set of rules and even hand you the keys to the whole park when you complete it. They celebrate violence, not to achieve one's own desires or building to a future plan, but instead just for the sake of it. They're in it for the love of the game, a game that is core to the ethics they have grown up in and cultivated. Just like the id, ego, and superego come together to create a functioning person, the raider groups do as well in order to create a functioning Nuka-World. They check and balance each other in such a way as to build out an empire. With the help of the sole survivor, they're even able to expand their reach to Boston. They're unlike any other raider gangs we've seen so far. Some groups in the Commonwealth have managed to take over streets and buildings, but our friends in Nuka-World have conquered the equivalent of a small city and built a thriving business. The human mind is unstoppable, so a conglomerate modeled after it is naturally pretty impressive. Now, do I think this was done intentionally? Probably not. But I think it just goes to show how these are innate archetypes that can occur naturally when producing a story. And maybe it was even the minds of the developers calling out for some inner recognition.